Up next on The Reveal, a canine police dog disobeys orders and goes on attack. What went wrong?
The bite was bad. The signing off on it later and saying it was okay was much worse.
Sentenced to a year in prison for possessing less than an ounce of weed.
Did the judge say why so long?
But that was before 11 Alive and investigators get involved. A war veteran served his country with honor.
Nothing but denials.
Now he needs the government to step up for him. The Reveal begins now.
Welcome to The Reveal, a show dedicated to life-changing investigations.
We've unlocked several secrets hidden inside the Roswell Police Department.
Step out of the vehicle for me.
From the arrest of a driver on the flip of a coin to muted body cameras from the suspected DUI of an off-duty officer.
Getting cold yet?
And police intentionally freezing a 13-year-old boy to extract a confession. All of our investigations have focused on what police commanders did or didn't do after those incidents, including attempts to keep the public from finding out. Tonight, video we want to warn you is painful to watch. Video of a police canine attacking a 17-year-old suspect. It was kept hidden for nearly 2 years after police commanders in Roswell determined that the dog and his handler did nothing wrong. A Roswell canine handler yells off 18 times. So why did his police dog refuse to release a teen suspect from his jaws?
The dog should have come off.
Professor Charles Meslow got his PhD studying police dog training.
Now he tries to bite the handler a second time, a third time.
And Dr. Meslow spent a decade working canine as a police officer.
At that point, the dog had made a decision. That's the problem when you let animals make decisions in tactical situations.
We showed him this dash cam video of a Roswell police dog biting a passenger who had bailed out of a stolen car and then gave up.
Handler literally should have hooked that dog up right there. Right there is where he made his mistake. And everything went downhill from this point forward.
This is the scene today. Police wouldn't give us the dash camera video until this year because technically the case was still open. But now we can look back 2 years through a window in time to what police say was the critical moment. First, the officer says, "Come here." Play.
Come here right now.
Fast forward. Then the officer says, "Get down on the ground." Play.
Get on the ground.
But the officer doesn't say, "Get down on the ground on your stomach with your hands out." So the teen instead decides to sit on this curb behind a bush. Then he puts his hands up. But police say putting his hands up and hands down behind the bush constituted furtive movements that triggered the dog to deploy not only on his own without a command from his handler, play, but also against the commands of his handler. Fast forward. What follows are 18 commands of off, yet the dog continues to attack. Then right here, the leash breaks and the dog goes back and grabs his hand and holds him now for another 8 seconds. 2 attacks, no commands to apprehend, ignoring all commands to stop. The dog nearly biting his own handler in the end.
You don't normally see the dog come off of a bite of a suspect and then go after the handler.
Is there something you would have done differently to get the dog to stop?
I'd have told him to stop. If he was properly trained, he'd have come off the bite.
He has received additional training, and I can't tell you it's because of that specific incident, but it was around that time.
Police Chief Rusty Grant's command staff cleared the officer and the dog, writing in their use of force review, no training issues observed. The canine responded as he should, and Canine Robbie did just as he had been trained by knowing when to apprehend a subject for unacceptable behavior.
This should have been picked up in the supervisor's review For them to sign off on it and say the dog was performing as trained either indicates the supervisor does not know how a police dog is supposed to be trained or that they simply didn't care.
This dog was not taken out of service after this incident. This dog wasn't retrained because of this incident. Do you agree with that?
No. The dog should have been pulled from the street. The handler probably should have been pulled, and they should have gone through remedial training. The dog was not responding to commands.
I sent the dog, and he gave up, so I called the dog off. But in the haste of it, things are amping up. He's screaming like a little schoolgirl.
Do you, just as a human being, regret that this kid was mauled when all of his charges were dropped?
I think it is regrettable and it's troublesome, to be honest with you, and that's why the dog went under, additional training.
Now, right there, that dog has decided. What triggered the dog was literally the suspect. He raised his hands up again. It wasn't that he was starting to resist. He literally just moved his hands. The dog took it as a threat.
Dr. Meslow says the dog made all the decisions and ignored all commands. But the canine expert is more troubled that Roswell Police Department commanders saw no issues with the attack.
If a car malfunctioned or a gun malfunctioned, we would have fixed that right away. For whatever reason, they didn't seem to think that this was a problem. And I can't imagine any handler that works in this field that would think otherwise. If you can't control your dog, you're a liability. You're no longer an asset to your agency. You are a liability magnet. You're going to get sued, you're going to hurt people, and your agency is going to write checks.
Now, Faith, there was no lawsuit filed in this case. We were unable to locate the teen, and the statute of limitations, it expired a few weeks ago.
And you've done a lot on the Roswell Police Department, broken a lot of stories. Is this connected to any of them?
It is actually related to the coin flip case because this canine officer, Lauren Austin, when he was leaving the department for another job recently, he wrote this memo to Human Resources, essentially saying that it's a daily topic of conversation among officers, the coin flip case, and an embarrassment to the department.
Up next on The Reveal.
When we heard a judge sentenced Mr. Stovall to a year in jail for less than an ounce of weed, we started asking questions.
The only reason Mr. Stovall was sentenced to 12 months in jail is because he's poor.
If you have a news tip or a comment on one of our investigations, email us at thereveal@11alive.com. Tonight, an 11 Alive investigation leads a Georgia judge to reduce a man's jail sentence. Robert Stovall was sentenced to a year behind bars for possession of less than an ounce of weed.
But our investigation revealed questionable circumstances which led to his arrest and the consequences of Georgia's patchwork of marijuana laws.
491, 1038.
A Noonan, Georgia police officer calls in a license plate of a vehicle he's never seen before.
Appears to be like a Toyota Celica, maybe.
When he pulls the driver over, the officer smells marijuana and asks 37-year-old Robert Stovall to get out of the car.
I do have a small personal that I smoke for recreation.
Brad Moody is Stovall's attorney.
He was very forthcoming and that it was just a tiny amount of marijuana. The officers were very clear on that.
It's a tiny little bit, like 2 nuggets.
I thought it was more than that.
No, he was nice as could be about it.
Oh, yeah.
According to the incident report, the officer found 1.5 grams worth of weed in Stovall's car, a misdemeanor crime.
This morning's calendar.
The Coweta County Solicitor's Office recommended a $1,300 fine, a year probation, and community service. During Stovall's day in court, Moody then asked Coweta County Judge Say Van Patten Palakos that Stovall couldn't afford the fine, and accepting the solicitor's plea deal would have set his client up for failure. Stovall is homeless, jobless, and at that point, his car broken down.
So putting him on probation is just asking for them to revoke him.
Moody asked Judge Palakos for jail time instead. The judge agreed, but shocked Moody and Stovall with the sentence. 12 months in jail, the maximum the law allows, for possession of less than an ounce of weed, about the weight of a few Cheerios.
So we're talking about a couple of Cheerios of marijuana, and they're wanting to put this guy in jail, lock him in a steel cage for 12 months because he possessed something that grows naturally. That's why they call it weed. You don't have to do anything to it, it just grows.
Did the judge say why so long?
Only that we asked for a jail sentence, so that's what she was going to give him. The only reason Mr. Stovall was sentenced to 12 months in jail is because he's poor.
While Coweta County and most of rural Georgia can still sentence defendants of misdemeanor marijuana possession of up to a year in jail, a growing number of Georgia cities have decriminalized the crime, essentially making it a civil penalty. About a half a dozen cities in Georgia so far. Atlanta's fine is $75.
But here we are, 45 minutes outside of the city in Coweta County, and what he would have just had to pay a fine in Atlanta for, he now gets 12 months in the county jail.
The marijuana issue.
Judge Palakos declined an on-camera interview, but over the phone told 11 Alive she stands by her sentence, citing Stovall's 3 prior marijuana possession arrests.
Only one of these offenses has been within the past decade.
A few days after 11 Alive reached out to Judge Palakos, according to this court transcript, she called Moody to say she was contacted by a reporter and then suggested multiple times Moody file a motion for reconsideration rather than posting stuff on social media. A month later, Stovall got a new hearing and Judge Palakos changed the jail sentence.
I will amend the sentence as follows. It's 12 months in jail, you get 57 days jail, time served. I'll suspend the rest of the jail time upon the condition that you complete a drug and alcohol evaluation.
The judge changed Stovall's original 12-month sentence to 57 days time served in jail. And the day after Independence Day, we were there when Stovall got his freedom back.
How you feeling?
Like a new man. Yeah. Definitely glad. Very thankful.
Stovall knows he broke the law, expected repercussions, but believes the judge abused her authority.
If we didn't call the judge, where do you think you'd be?
Still in there. Definitely. No doubt. No doubt. I'd still be there.
Without y'all's intervention, this wouldn't have happened.
Stovall's biggest frustration isn't with the judge, but that traffic stop. According to the video, the officer pulled Stovall over for a broken tag light.
That was not the case. On the film, you could see my tag lights operating. I felt like I could see my tag lights operating. I know my tag lights were not out.
When the officer gets out of his patrol car, he walks right past the tag light and never cites Stovall for it either.
There was nothing in particular about myself that should have drawn the attention of any law enforcement, but it did, you know. And
because?
My age group and my demographic, you know.
Being a black man.
Yeah, I'm a black man in the South. I mean, really, let's call it like it is, you know.
Andy, what's happened to Mr. Stovall since your investigation?
Well, according to his attorney, he's now living out of state, and to add insult to injury, they've repoed his car along with all of his belongings.
And my understanding is this all developed over social media. How?
Yeah, this attorney complained on Facebook, and one of our colleagues saw it, so that's how it all started.
Coming up on The Reveal.
Here is my medication drawer.
A combat veteran's story that sparked outrage and new legislation.
He put his life on the line when this country needed him the most, and tonight a combat veteran wants the government to take accountability for his illnesses he says were due to his exposure to Agent Orange during his military service. His battle has been chronicled by our investigative team in Minneapolis.
Today, Bob Morris is a man with a monument-sized weight lifted off his shoulders.
Finally, after all these years.
Flashback to March 2017.
Here is my medication drawer.
And we were sharing the Avon, Minnesota veteran's story about his more than a decade-long battle with the VA over benefits for serious health problems he strongly suspected were caused by exposure in Korea to the toxic herbicide Agent Orange.
Digging into the dirt where the Agent Orange was being sprayed.
The VA's website says veterans who served in Korea near the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, between 1968 and 1971 are presumed to have been exposed. But every time Bob tried to get benefits,
nothing but denials.
The government lost Bob's military records in a fire. But he had other proof he'd been at the DMZ, letters from other men in his unit, and even a recording he'd mailed from Korea to his parents in St. Cloud.
I was at combat fairness school.
telling them about his time at the DMZ.
I fired all these things we were at the DMZ. I was on the DMZ.
Determined to fight his denials, Bob repeatedly tried calling the Board of Veterans Appeals in D.C. to find out his hearing date. But to add insult to injury, kept getting transferred to one number that was disconnected
to connect to Laurel Locksmith,
and another
The phone's ringing
that rang repeatedly without being answered. Carol Evans' investigation, profiling Bob's story of disconnects and denials, made waves all the way to the nation's capital.
because this was just an outrage.
Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar and Congressman Tim Walz both got involved.
If Bob's appeal would have been heard in a timely manner, he wouldn't be needing to make this call.
Congressman Walz introduced legislation to cut red tape and help break the VA's benefit claims backlog. President Trump recently signed that bill into law. Also because of Bob's story, an antiquated VA call center was shut down. As for Bob himself, Senator Klobuchar helped him finally get that appeals hearing he'd been waiting for.
And he had such a strong case for a disability based on his service, and yet he had to wait for years and years.
After waiting months more for a ruling,
Got the letter right here.
Bob just received his answer in the mail.
Well, this is my order that my service connection for Agent Orange was granted.
Bob Morris's story has sparked change in the VA benefits system, which President Donald Trump signed into law. Our investigator, AJ Legault, has this follow-up.
Bob has begun receiving benefits for his heart disease and diabetes, which are two of the presumptive side effects of Agent Orange exposure. He also, though, has bladder cancer, which many in the veteran community also believe to be tied to exposure to Agent Orange. However, the VA does not yet recognize that as a direct correlation. For The Reveal, I'm AJ Legault.
If you have a news tip or a comment on one of our investigations, email us at thereveal@11alive.com.
I'm Rebecca Lindstrom. Coming up next week on The Reveal, somebody is breaking the law.
Somebody's taking a huge risk to be able to get the product here.
A look inside an underground network of families doing what it takes to get their hands on medical marijuana. We follow one mom that's found a way to provide it legally and free.
I've thrown desks and books at teachers and chased people with broken scissors.
And a family torn apart for nearly 2 months when they couldn't get access to the oil. Next Sunday on The Reveal.
You've been watching The Reveal, a show fueled by investigations that make an impact.
And join us next Sunday at 6 for The Reveal.